Welcome, everyone. Dr. Angela here, and I'm very excited today because we have with us Tyler Lebaron, who is an expert in molecular hydrogen. He's actually the executive director of the Molecular Hydrogen Institute. And also, he teaches and he is a worldwide educator on the topic of molecular hydrogen. And we, of course, have our expert water scientist, Robert Slovak, in the house as well. And of course, he was the early developer of reverse osmosis. And it's a pleasure to be with both of you today. I think it's fascinating that back in 2009, Tyler, you were studying and you came across some research about molecular hydrogen. And then around the same time, about a year later, Robert actually developed the very first hydrogen tablet. Co-developed, yes. Yes, if you'd like to talk a little bit about that and take us back a decade.
Well, actually, as Tyler would point out, if I don't say it, that I actually missed the whole boat of let's say, the functionality of molecular hydrogen and the mechanisms. So interestingly, I just came across this is of historical significance. This is the very first bottle from 2010, or among the first run, that was called Active H- of what was the precursor of the modern hydrogen tablet. And we didn't understand the mechanism because I didn't have the benefit of learning all the neat information Tyler was learning. So we were thinking of this as an electron donor. Okay, and electron donors are reducing agents, and we thought of it in that way. We didn't ever suspect that the molecule of hydrogen itself was a unique antioxidant-like molecule.
Well, let's take a step back, Robert, and let's get back to Tyler. What fascinated you back in 2009 when you came across this research from 2007? Tell us what fascinated you and how that changed your whole career.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it's interesting, the intersection that I'll have here with Robert, getting back to his story. But yeah, in 2009, I had actually been introduced to alkaline ionized water, all right? And I heard so many crazy, absurd and powerful testimonials, as there is in that industry. And I was like, this is fascinating. I'm going to try to understand this, And as I started to investigate some of these claims, I was like, wow, like none of this makes sense, actually. And the more I look at the research, but there was some research showing that had some therapeutic effects, but it wasn't really understood why that was. A lot of people were talking about the benefits of, alkaline water. We need to alkalize our bodies and this type of stuff. And I know Robert's talked about this a lot, but just to put it in context, even if we subscribe to the alkalizing concept, well, alkaline water is not a buffer, so it can't really neutralize the pH of water, right? Or the pH of anything. And in fact, sodium bicarbonate or baking soda, which is our body's natural buffering system, you could neutralize more acid with simply a teaspoon of baking soda than you could with over 700 liters of alkaline water at a pH of 10. So right there, it's like, well, then how can this water ever give you any benefit when it doesn't have the alkalinity, which maybe we'll talk about some more, but it's not a buffer. But the question was still then, well, then how can this water have therapeutic effects? Well, the first question is, does it really have therapeutic effects? And actually, that's what I first studied. I actually did a little study to see if it elicited any biological effects at all. Because in science, the first thing is to confirm or refute that the phenomena is actually occurring. And then after that, you try to figure out what the mechanism is. And sometimes people do it the other way around, or they think something's happened and they have all these crazy conjecture of how it's happening. And then later on, it's like, well, you just wasted a lot of time because actually it's not happening. It's a correlation causation fallacy or placebo or something else, right? So anyway, I did some research, found that there really was an effect. And during some of my investigations and looking in the literature, I saw other papers that were talking about various biological effects of this alkaline ionized water, but still the secret sauce, the key ingredient, remained elusive, and nobody really knew. But the one thing that seemed to people started to really gain a consensus on was the importance of the so-called negative ORP, or negative oxidation reduction potential, which I know is exactly where Robert fell right into the
active H minus.
Exactly, right? As an electron donor and all of these things. And that was the idea. How this water, somehow it has this negative oxidation reduction potential. And so, logically, it's like, oh, that means it can act as an antioxidant and reduce things, without understanding, there's thermodynamics and reaction kinetics are totally separate areas that need to be discussed. But anyway, it was still not even clear what was responsible for the negative ORP. And some people thought, well, maybe this is like, there's like somehow these free electrons solvated in the water, or some extra energy or something.
Exactly.
And it certainly isn't true. And in fact, if it were true, like, not only would the water shock you with, a few volts of electricity, but it would also, be like a toxic free radical, because it's a reactive electron, right? But now we know is simply when you take hydrogen gas and dissolve it into water, you get this negative ORP, and that's all it is. That's what's responsible for the negative ORP. And so the one thing that did get it right is the negative ORP is a good indicator of whether or not that specific water could be therapeutic for you. But that's specifically and exclusively due to the presence of hydrogen gas. So it was around this time, though, 2009, 2010 or so, that I came across that article in Nature Medicine that was published in 2007 that you mentioned, that showed that hydrogen acts as a therapeutic antioxidant. And it was a really interesting study, because they just took a rat and they did a stroke model, basically, and when this caused like a lot of ischemia and reperfusion damage and everything. And when you administered hydrogen gas through inhalation at a 4.6% concentration, which is important because that's below the flammability level, and so it can be clinically viable. And when they gave the hydrogen gas, that markedly suppressed the brain damage induced in this stroke model of the rat's cerebral infarction. So that was pretty powerful. And was
that American research or Japanese?
No, that was the Japanese. That was the pioneering one. That was with Dr. Ota Osawa, in 2007. That was the one that really got the researchers interested in the therapeutic effects of hydrogen. And I then, of course, started making the connections with, okay, so this article showing hydrogen gas is therapeutic. And of course, when you do electrolysis, which by the very definition of electrolysis is the decomposition of water, right? Hydrogen and oxygen. Exactly. You're going to get hydrogen in the water, and maybe the hydrogen gas is going to be responsible for the effects. And subsequent research, including a study that I was involved in, we demonstrated conclusively that when you remove the hydrogen gas from alkaline ionized water, the therapeutic benefits are eliminated. And when you simply infuse hydrogen gas into water through whichever method, you get all these therapeutic benefits. So hydrogen gas really is the secret sauce, so to speak, in a lot of these alkaline ionized water, these magnesium sticks, these types of tablets that Robert was talking about, has nothing to do with somehow these free electrons. And Robert's a very very poor choice of wording, the H minus, because of course that would be a hydride ion, which
it couldn't even exist for a couple microseconds.
Exactly. I mean, the pKa is like 33, so you have to have a pH of around 33 or so, which of course is impossible. I mean, with typical product solvents. But anyway, so it's nothing to do with that. We are talking about the molecular hydrogen as simply a diatomic molecule. So two hydrogen atoms get married and they're happily ever after. And that is the hydrogen molecule. And that is, of course, the big thing with hydrogen now is is using it as an alternative energy source because it's 3 times more energy dense than gasoline, and so it's great for that as well. But now we're finding it's also like an alternative medicine as well.
Yeah.
So you were fascinated by this, and then you went on to go to Japan and you involved yourself in the research. And when I was doing some studying, I found that there was an Italian MD back in 1798 that did write about the inhalation of hydrogen. So we're all, hydrogen is just the buzz right now, but going back, it was talked about so long ago. And even in 75, there was research by Texas A&M and Baylor. And that was fascinating in that it showed that with a hyperbaric hydrogen chamber, that there was melanoma regression in an animal model, which is fascinating. That was back in 75. Now, the majority of research has come out since 2007. There's over 1,000 different articles and about 80 or more clinical studies so far?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you're right. I went to Japan because I wanted to research hydrogen gas. So I actually contacted all the groups that were doing research on hydrogen, and I just found the universities that were the most into it, the most prestigious. They're really getting into the mechanisms. And so yeah, I did an internship at Nagoya University in the Department of Neurogenetics and researched the molecular mechanisms of hydrogen gas on various cell signaling pathways. And that's when I really saw with my own eyes like that it really is having a biological effect in cell culture, and then in animal studies, and then subsequently in human studies, and so on. So it's very fascinating. But 2007, as you said, that's really was the pioneering article that spawned or exploded, no pun intended, a whole bunch of extra additional research. But you're right, yeah, that article in 1798, yeah, I found that. I saw my website, it's probably where you saw it from, but it was very interesting because back in 2010 or so, 2010, I was trying to find everything I could possibly find on the benefits or the science or the effects of hydrogen. And so I went through, libraries and through databases and just doing search and just hours and hours of reading. And I came across that book by this Italian physicist on the medical gases and things. And lo and behold, he's talking about hydrogen. He's like, if you mix 3 parts hydrogen with 1 part oxygen and 4 quarts of this, it just changed the way they're talking about it. And he's like, but you get this immediate relief from inflammation in the lungs, and it was very fascinating that I had some of this conversation way back then. But then, yeah, it was largely, lost or not, further studied. And then in 1975, right, that's what the article from Texas A&M and Baylor University. I mean, that's a pretty prestigious, organization, university. But yeah, it was very impressive. They basically took these mice and did transplanted melanoma tumors, and they did a hyperbaric hydrogen therapy, and they had marked regression of the melanoma tumors. It was very high pressure. It was like 8 atmospheres of pressure, like 97% hydrogen, 3% oxygen. So the moles or the amount of oxygen would be the same at 21%, but of course the atmospheric pressure was so much higher that you have enough oxygen.
Did they say why they were even motivated to try hyperbaric hydrogen? I mean, did it have anything to do with diving? They saw something in a diver, something like that?
It's a funny story. So actually, they were interested because the first article that really showed therapeutic effects of hydrogen, was okay. Actually, okay, I'm going to back up. That article, one of the reasons, this article, another article, there's one in France that was also published that hydrogen has some therapeutic effects as well, and some of those link back to an article that was written in Nature. It's like in the Nature, it's like a satire column, and I forget what it was really called. But this chemist, like the Drago chemist or something, I have to go back and look at it. He was actually he would make comments all the time, like little strips of comedy, satire, and things about chemistry and science and this kind of stuff. And he decided to write an article about the biological therapeutic effect of hydrogen gas. And you can, dissolve it in
my
water
God.
to help with hangovers. And it's going to have all these benefits. I mean, it was just a total joke. I mean, everyone laughed about it because it's how ridiculous is that? This is like in the 1960s or something.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, the Dreadcode chemists or something, and he had all this information, and it was actually quite scientifically sound. It's just laughable because it's like that's not how it works, and until you find out actually it does work that way. So that some of that was actually what spawned some of the researchers in France to do this study, and then with these guys from Baylor. They were just also interested in the fact that hydrogen gas as a reducing agent could react with hydroxyl radicals. And when you have ionizing radiation and different problems, you produce hydroxyl radicals. And so you could have like a reaction to neutralize those toxic radicals. So that was kind of some of the impetus there. But the thing you have to consider, though, is hyperbaric hydrogen, especially at 8 atmospheres of pressure, is completely impractical clinically. I mean, when they do hyperbaric oxygen therapy, they're probably like at, I don't know, 2 atmospheres
Or less.
Or less, right? So, going, to 8 atmospheres of pressure, it's just not, and it's like a compressed bomb now, right? So, I mean, there's some safety concerns.
Right. It's not practical.
Right. So I think the reason why the Nature Medicine publication has such a great impact is because it was found 2 things. Number one, such a low level of hydrogen inhalation, like I said, below the flammability level, makes it clinically relevant. And then simply by dissolving the gas in cell culture at, again, clinically relevant concentrations that you could get either from inhalation or simply drinking hydrogen-rich water, then you actually saw therapeutic, protective, antioxidant-like effects in cell culture as well. And that's when research is like, wow, we really need to take a look at this because hydrogen is so ubiquitous, it's safe, and we should look at it. And so then like you said, there's now probably closer to 2,000 publications and over 100 human studies on benefits of hydrogen.
Tyler, a lot of our audience is into anti-aging. And now there's so much talk about aging as a diagnosis, as a disease. Robert and I are both people who have notoriously taken a lot of different supplements for many years. So I try to take things that have broad range benefits. That's why I love hydrogen so much. Name me one system in the body that is not impacted by hydrogen.
Well, I mean, I do wonder if maybe I'd like to know about the red blood cells because they lack mitochondria, and hydrogen gas seems to have a major benefit on the mitochondria, and a lot of the mechanisms could stem from that as an upstream target. Yes. But then you still have studies showing benefits in the cell membrane itself. So I don't
know. Fingernails.
Yeah, maybe it's your fingernails. But
system-wide, when we're talking about the endocrine system, the cardiovascular system, when you're looking at systems of growth,
right?
Yeah. So I'd like to kind of shift gears, and for some of the audience that may be new to hydrogen, let's talk about some of the main reasons hydrogen is different, molecular hydrogen, namely that it's selective, that there's high bioavailability, there's no toxic byproducts. Can we talk a little bit about, for example, the selectivity? Because so many people don't quite understand that you could be taking too many antioxidants. There could be a downside to that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the unique things that set hydrogen apart or uniquely qualify it as a superior antioxidant is the fact that it is selective, and it's selective in several different ways. One of the most obvious ways from a chemistry perspective is simply that hydrogen gas does not have the reducing power or the reactivity to react with normal free radicals. So first, let's talk about free radicals. Obviously, there are bad free radicals, but the fact is there are good free radicals too, right? Just like cholesterol, there's it's kind of this is an example, but like you have like HDL cholesterol, which is the good kind, and LDL is the bad kind. But so you can't just say cholesterol is bad, right? You have to.
It's all about balance, and
and you can say the same thing about free radicals. So maybe a bad one would be the hydroxyl radical or another oxidant, peroxynitrite, and those ones would be primarily bad. We would consider there could be some benefits on accident from them. And then you also have other things such as nitric oxide or superoxide, hydrogen peroxide. These oxidants, they're quite good for you. They're very important. I mean, nitric oxide is what induces vasodilation, and that's very important for our health. So we don't want to neutralize all of them. And typically, your antioxidants, they contain a delocalized conjugated pi structure, which allows them to donate an electron quite easily, and then they can neutralize all these antioxidants quite simply. Now, that makes it so these antioxidants are not selective. They're not discriminatory at all, and they're just able to react and neutralize any any free radicals. Whereas with hydrogen gas, it's very stable. It doesn't give off its electrons very easy at all. It's actually very difficult. And so if you put hydrogen gas in combination with nitric oxide or hydrogen peroxide or other oxidants, you really don't have any reaction at all without a catalyst or very high temperature or something. Just like you put hydrogen and oxygen together, they're totally safe until somebody lights a match, and you know where that goes. So that's one reason why hydrogen gas is very unique, is because it's selective. It only can react with or neutralize the most toxic free radicals, but it's going to leave alone the important biological signaling molecules. So when we exercise, when we just through normal metabolism, we're producing small amounts of free radicals all the time, which is so important for overall mitochondrial health and for our cells, because it's part of cell communication and cell signaling are these free radicals. So we don't want to neutralize them, and hydrogen gas doesn't. But it is able to neutralize the hydroxyl radical. However, even with those free radicals that are bad for you, that are good for you, like nitric oxide or superoxide, when the levels get too high, then they become bad, right? Because they're still oxidants. They're still very reactive. They still damage your cell membranes. They still cause all these problems. And typically you want to have an antioxidant status that is able to balance out the oxidants. But with aging and with diseases, or just the way food is, or all these different pollutions, all these ionized radiation, so many problems, that starts to deplete our antioxidant status and starts to increase the free radical production. And now you have this dysregulation and imbalance where now we're going to actually start having an oxidative stress. Now, hydrogen is still able to help regulate and suppress this type of oxidative stress, even though it doesn't have the power or the ability to react with those free radicals like nitric oxide and superoxide. It's able to still lower that oxidative stress. And the way it does that is through its signal modulating effects. So those free radicals, so like nitric oxide, for example, when that gets you get too much of that, that's typically happens because you have high inflammation with the macrophages, interleukin-6, these cytokines that are activating INOS activity. That's inducible nitric oxide synthase. We have three different enzymes: INOS, ENOS, endothelial nitric oxide synthase, and NOS, neuronal nitric oxide synthase. And when INOS gets activated during some inflammatory cascade or something, then you produce a lot of nitric oxide, which in the short term and for different reasons is very important for you, because that's how you inactivate pathogens and viruses and these things. That's very good. But if it's too active, you're going to get a lot of damage, oxidative damage. And hydrogen gas has the ability to suppress INOS activity. So there's there's one way I'm explaining in which hydrogen gas is able to prevent this oxidative stress, because it's able to regulate upstream these enzymes that are producing those free radicals in the first place. Another one is the superoxide anion radical. And this is often produced when you have hyperactive NOx enzymes, like it's an NADPH oxidase system that takes oxygen and gives it an electron and converts it to the superoxide radical. And then that is also involved in, immunity and, and all the beneficial things we want. But again, when that gets hyperactivated, then it's too much and it causes that serious oxidative damage, leading to cellular apoptosis and tissue necrosis and, essentially, cell death and then multi-organ failure and so on, right?
Right.
Does hydrogen have any direct loop into increasing the response of SOD, catalase, glutathione when this event starts happening and you need to address excess reactive oxygen species? Or
yeah, that's another good point. So in this other mechanism, we're talking about suppressing these enzymes that are hyperactive. So we suppress INOS. Hydrogen can also suppress the NOx enzymes when it's producing too much superoxide. So we've talked about two ways so far that hydrogen is able to regulate the antioxidant and redox balance of the cells. One with selectively against the toxic free radicals, and another with suppressing too much free radical production. And the third way is actually exactly what you said. And this is probably the most important way, is it's able to upregulate and bring back to homeostasis our body's innate natural antioxidant enzymes, such as your superoxide dismutase, glutathione peroxidase, glutathione in general through the other enzymes, and hemoxygenase 1, for example. And it does this because it's able to activate the KEAP1 NRF2 pathway. And that's just the cell signaling pathway and antioxidant response pathway, where when NRF2 gets activated in the cytosol, they split apart. NRF2 can go to the nucleus and cause the DNA to be transcribed to produce a bunch more antioxidant proteins. It's a detoxification and antioxidation enzymes, right? So yes.
Tyler?
Yeah.
One of the most exciting things for me is the increase in PGC1 alpha. So for people who are more concerned about fatty acid metabolism and mitochondrial biogenesis and that sort of thing, can you talk a little bit about how it impacts?
So that's, I agree. That's also a very fascinating area, because hydrogen has been shown to increase PGC1 alpha levels, which is a marker of mitochondrial biogenesis. And it appears to do that the most in the cases where there's a problem. So like in mice, for example, when there's some genetic defect and they're, like a leptin deficiency or something in these areas of mitochondrial myopathies, then you're going to see higher levels of the activation of PGC1 alpha, because you're not in homeostasis. You need more ATP, you need more mitochondria. And hydrogen is able to do this. In one of the studies, they found that hydrogen was able to increase the hepatic growth factor of FGF21, fibroblast growth factor 21, which induces energy expenditure. And so this is going to help with things like fatty acid oxidation. Of course, if you have the mitochondria, you're able to burn fats, right? And so, and do it efficiently without producing too many free radicals. So there are the benefits there. Then is you have the group of athletes, for example. So maybe you can get some potentiating benefits with molecular hydrogen for your mitochondria, your metabolic health and fitness, and then also in disease conditions, chronic conditions like chronic fatigue syndrome. So many different conditions. They're linked to mitochondrial dysfunction or low ATP production, and so hydrogen could potentially help. And well, that could potentially explain one of the reasons why hydrogen appears to be helpful in these types of conditions.
So what's interesting is we are upregulating mitochondrial function, so very beneficial for athletes, just overall energy. But then we're able, with this selective antioxidant, to target the most cytotoxic free radicals, the most harmful free radicals that are produced, are created within the mitochondria. And this hydrogen gets into the mitochondria because it is the smallest molecule. So what you have is a problem with other, the bioavailability of other nutrients that someone might be taking that might not have that same impact.
Yeah, that's a very important point, because obviously the only way something can benefit you is if you actually consume it, if you get it administered to you somehow. But then it's not just that simple. It has to get into the cells, and then it's not that simple. It has to get to where you want to get. So that you have like the mitochondria. What if you want to get inside the matrix of the mitochondria? How are you going to do that? Because so you have to go through the intestines and not get degraded from the stomach acid or enzymes or the bacteria or something. Then you have to make it, through the liver, right? Which a lot of things get metabolized by the first pass effect of the liver very quickly. So now it's inactivated before it reaches systemic circulation, and then it's in the blood. But now it has to go through the capillaries and into the interstitial space through diffusion, and then it needs to go to the cells. And now it's got to somehow get through this, hydrophobic cell membrane, which it's going to have to often go through a protein transport or a carrier or, something to get it in there. Otherwise, it's not going to go. And then once you're in the cell, you're in the cytosol. Great. Now what do? Well, if your goal is to get to, say, the mitochondria, well, all right, so you can kind of diffuse through the outer mitochondrial membrane for the most part. The larger molecules won't be able to do that. But then you run up against the inner mitochondrial membrane, which is essentially impermeable to almost everything. There's only 5, 6 different things that will easily penetrate that, and so it's very difficult. Whereas yes, molecular hydrogen, because it is the smallest molecule in the universe, it's able to penetrate right through the cell membranes, just based upon its diffusion. And so not only because it's small, but also because it's a non-polar neutral molecule. So something like sodium ion. I mean, it's just one atom. It's the sodium ion. It's small, but that doesn't just go through the cells at all. In fact, it has to go through a specific ion channel, right? A sodium channel. And it's highly regulated, and the channels are so specific that it can distinguish and differentiate between a sodium ion and a potassium ion, which it's all based upon the Sylvatian sphere of how it's going to get in the cell. But I mean, it's very selective, very specific, and so just because something is small also doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get through. And then you want something that's neutral, but then water is also neutral, right? But water also can't easily penetrate the cell membranes, because it's a polar molecule, and that's why it has like the oxygen and then the hydrogens on both sides. Instead of just being linear, right? It has that triangle shape, right? And that's because it's a polar molecule, and so water can't go through the cell membrane. It has to go through another protein channel, which we know is the aquaporin. And I just put in all this comparison so we can see. Yes, hydrogen, it doesn't have this problem because it's a neutral, non-polar molecule. It's a small diffusible gas, and so it gets there everywhere. Now, the downside to that is, the theoretical downside to that is, therefore, it should not have any biological benefits, because if it's not charged, if it's non-polar, if it's all these things, then how can it react with a receptor or bind to something or some protein or something like this? And but yet it does, it does have biological effects, and we're getting closer to maybe understanding some of that mechanism as to why. But that certainly now we see is a very neat benefit of molecular hydrogen, that it is so bioavailable, the most bioavailable of any other molecule. And maybe, I guess now we consider one of the downsides then is, because hydrogen gas is so permeable and evasive, it's difficult to contain. Right, so hydrogen, you can't store it in your plastic bottles. Like you can have like carbonated water, right? But CO2 is a pretty large molecule, right? Carbon, 2 oxygens, and it can stay in the plastic container quite well. Hydrogen is not going to do it. You put hydrogen water in a sealed bottle, and give it some hours, some time, and the hydrogen gas is going to diffuse right through the plastic container.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that bring us to a point we ought to at least provide some of our less biochemically oriented audience with some practical stuff, like where are you getting this hydrogen, guys?
Right,
okay?
Right. What's the best way to get it?
I mean, well, maybe it's not even the best, but people, you can just breathe. You can breathe hydrogen from a bottle of hydrogen. You can use a device called a hydrogen inhalation device that uses either electrolysis to separate water into hydrogen and oxygen, or something a little more modern, a proton exchange membrane apparatus to allow having access to inhalation of hydrogen. And then there's, of course, maybe after that, there's the tablets,
which are
and this is
magnesium,
the happening hip cool way. And you put a tablet, for those who don't even know this, and you can see this makes, this is makes hydrogen.
Those tablets are different, right, than your other H- tablets from 2010.
Yeah, I'm reluctant to open this brand new bottle, but it sounds like there's still tablets in it. But we did have a stability problem for a couple of years in which they disintegrated. But
which reminds me, because it's such a complex tablet, when you drop it into water, there's metallic magnesium that reacts, and it produces the H2 gas, but you want to drink that immediately. Otherwise, the longer it sits, the longer that gas dissipates, and you don't get that clinical effect.
This is only maybe good for another 10, 15 minutes, and then it's gone. And then there's a very handy gadget.
Robert, go! You got to go back, because I disagree. We did test with tablets with the gas chromatography. You don't have 10 or 15 minutes. Right now, you should be drinking that. As soon as
I realize that, and I will take your orders.
Yeah, start doing it right now, Robert. Start drinking it. I want to see the whole thing gone before I finish.
Down. Down it, Robert.
Look at that.
But isn't it that within 5 minutes you're hitting peak plasma levels between 5 and 15 minutes?
Tell us. I really don't know the latest time. I mean, I tell people basically you have to drink this
right away
in less than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
As soon as it dissolves is what I tell people.
But I really don't know the curve, the latest curve.
Well, based upon what we saw with the gas chromatography, and you can talk with the company, their stuff more, but basically, as soon as that, if you're using you don't want to use cold water. If you don't use ice cold water, because the reaction is way too slow. So you use about room temperature water, and as soon as that tablet rises to the top, that's when you start drinking it. And so by the time you're finished, the tablet's completely dissolved, and that's simply going to give you the highest dose of hydrogen that you'll be able to get. Now, yes, if you waited for 10, 20, even an hour, you're still going to get hydrogen. In fact, you'll probably still get more hydrogen drinking it an hour later than you would with a lot of the products on the market, just because the tablets and how the tablets work. So
there are little gadgets that generate. These are gadgets as opposed to professional inhalation devices, and these just generate. They either use proton exchange membrane or a little electrolysis unit. You can see the hydrogen being made, and it turns off. And these can generate maybe 1.6 to 1 to 2 parts per million. You can do it multiple times and get up to maybe 3 parts per million.
I think we should mention, though, that there is some customer confusion on this, because when someone is dealing with a hydrogen generating machine, they're using electrolysis, there's always that danger of the production of ozone or chlorine, or there's there could be even some heavy metals. So, and also the issue of consistency.
What, Angela?
What was that?
What, using what kind of device?
With electrolysis devices to
Okay.
generate the hydrogen. But
Yeah.
there's an issue with consistency and the amount being produced. And that's why sometimes I have people asking us, what's the difference between this machine and the tablets? And I say, hey, you can easily get H2 blue and test the concentration that you're getting. Because for me personally, I want to get the highest dosage and cycle that, like Tyler talks about. It's better to cycle high dosing rather than getting an even lower dosage on a longer term basis.
Like, which would favor tablet use, etc.
Well, and just to add what you were saying, Robert, and also Angela, just some of the caveats on this. You know, it is true. You can get hydrogen from like a tank of gas, like you said, but that's, you know, you just have to be careful because not all hydrogen gas is pure. I mean, a lot of the hydrogen gas is broken down hydrocarbons, and now you're going to be inhaling a bunch of, you know.
Yes, this would not be a consumer.
I get emails from people who are like, I bought a tank of gas and I feel great, and I'm like, you're probably not inhaling hydrogen.
Oh my God!
So, you just need to be a little cautious on this, and just even Angela was saying, some of these products, they are producing chlorine as a byproduct, which isn't the worst thing, obviously, but maybe other things when you get lots of it, heavy metals, ozone, just, you know, just all these issues can happen. And then with these products like that portable one you showed, I don't know that one, but I will say a lot of those products don't actually make the 1.6 ppm. They make like 0.1 ppm, or
Also,
you know, or they can make higher. You just don't know. And then even if it is making that high initially, maybe after you know, so many weeks or whatever, the electronics, the batteries, the electrode corrosion,
the impurities in the water end up impacting the reacting device.
So I like those units if they're good, if they're not getting, you know, heavy metals and stuff. But I feel like people who want to use it, you'd almost want to like either really know the company you're buying it from, that they're you know, above board on testing and all this stuff, and or you buy what Angela said, this H2 blue reagent, and you just test it every, you know, so often to make sure that it's up to par. It's still doing what it did when you first got it, right? Mm-hmm. So, and just some things to consider about products. But as Angela said, some people, it seems they just like the tablets because it's so consistent. You get a high dose every time, and you get that, right? So consistent products would be like the tablets and the ready to drink products. That would be like a very consistent product, but it's not the only one.
And the tablets have morphed into different forms of the tablets. One that we came out with is the one that involves Chromax, which is a glucose regulator in the body. So because hydrogen, and maybe you can comment on this, hydrogen has metabolic benefits, especially for metabolic syndrome. When added with a chromium compound, it improves the performance of that even more. And a test was done. I think you were involved with this test to show that. And that this is.
Yeah, I wasn't involved with it, but I mean, certainly chromium, especially if there's a deficiency,
Right.
Yeah, has a major impact. And then I do wonder what the synergistic effects could be with the combination of hydrogen with other ingredients, such as the chromium or other things that we've seen that it seems that hydrogen is having synergistic effects with.
Yeah.
And do you have any comment while we're just on the tablet thing here, reviewing the ways to take it? There is a product that we've come up with that is for soaking, topical use.
Yeah, I actually have some of those.
We call it the horse tablet.
Yeah. So I ran out of tablets, and I had some of those, and yeah, I use that to drink and say not supposed to because the magnesium is not quite as pure, you know. But I really wanted some hydrogen. But one time I was in a hurry, and you should not do this at home, but I swallow the tablet sometimes with some water. That was the only thing I had, and I just got to get some hydrogen in my water, and I swallowed that.
Yeah, the large tablet.
Tablet, yeah, and I had a hard time getting it down. I was drinking so much water. So, and
to keep it from getting too hot.
Was that warm in your throat?
Yeah, I could feel it.
Oh, that's funny.
Heather, actually, one of the questions I wanted to know is how do you use hydrogen in your daily regimen? Can you share that with us?
Right. Well, I mean, I guess I swallow those tablets on accident. But
Can you strike that, please?
Yeah.
Do you take it before or after your workout?
Well, I tend to take it before. So I think maybe taking hydrogen in the morning on like an empty stomach, and then I think probably taking it before is often better. But often I end up taking it afterwards because like I feel good. I'm gonna go exercise. I have a good exercise. I come back and I'm like, now it's a really good exercise. I'm probably gonna, I don't know, be sore. Maybe I'll take some hydrogen to help me recover faster. So I often say it was probably better take it before, but I think if I did some statistics on it, I'd probably mostly take it after I work out, just on accident. But so I use, yeah, so I often will use the tablets. I had some other products. I did have some of those portable units that I liked, you know, just because it's just easy to just make a bunch of hydrogen. And then of course the ready to drink hydrogen water or hydrogen products that you know, for like more of a pre-workout, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk about ready to drink. There's generally two different iterations of ready to drink. One, probably the original type, came in what do we call it? A sack, a flexible
pouch.
A flexible pouch. And you know, I was wary of that from the very beginning. And as far as I know, they aren't that reliable in containing and preserving the hydrogen load that's in the pouch.
Well, yeah, it all depends on what your parameters are. Yeah, if talking about shelf life of months and years, then yeah, they're not, because it has pinholes and the hydrogen gas is eventually going to escape out. Right. But you know, you're not talking about, you know, a few weeks, you know, a month, you know, a couple months, or just
better than nothing. But I don't think you're not going to get over 2 ppm or anything.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. So you have two things. You have one, which is just the longevity itself. I mean, you put hydrogen in a can, if it's sealed correctly, it'll last. I mean,
now the can is yet the way to go. You know, an aluminum can.
Yeah,
it has to be aluminum, but aluminum does retain hydrogen. And if the can is precisely made, and it is a factor, it has been very successful at providing a long-lasting beverage in storage.
And at a higher concentration as well, because with the pouch, there's no pressure, there's no walls.
Right.
So everything's going to be left to just atmospheric pressure. And so the highest, even if you put in, you know, 3 milligram per liter hydrogen concentration, well, that's just going to go into the headspace, expand the walls a little bit until it reaches atmospheric equilibrium.
Right.
And now the highest concentration you're going to get is between, you know, like 1.4 to 1.6 ppm, often 1.2 ppm. And then over the coming weeks or days, depending on the type of pouch, I mean, some of them really don't work very well. It's just going to go down to undetectable levels.
So that brings us to the research that was published in May of this year, kind of looking at the molecular crosstalk between nitric oxide and molecular hydrogen in a beverage that contained some NO precursors along with molecular hydrogen that was infused in a specific beverage. really fascinating research that's coming out there. Do you guys want to talk about that at all?
I think since Tyler is, I believe he has the pole position in the research paper. That's quite,
Congratulations, by the way.
Congratulations. It's quite an impressive
Very.
paper and an impressive journal that published it. So tell us about it.
Yeah, so it is interesting finding these synergistic effects, because I'm most interested in trying to figure out the molecular mechanisms of hydrogen gas and how it's working. And one of the ways it appears to help is with regulating the production and metabolism of nitric oxide. And so to kind of set this up a little bit, well, first we did some preliminary work with a functional beverage, a hydrogen infused nitric oxide producing beverage, the hydro shot product. In fact, I have one on my desk right here. And it's has like 2 milligrams per liter of hydrogen, so good concentration of hydrogen. But what is interesting is combining the therapeutic effects of hydrogen with that of nitric oxide. And we understand that when we understand that nitric oxide, how important it is for you, as well as how detrimental it can be for you, right? So the nitric oxide, of course, that's involved in vasodilation, involved in immunity, immune response, involved in so many signaling cascades. I mean, that's how Viagra works. I mean, actually, not really. Viagra is a phosphodiesterase inhibitor that nitric oxide activates, but point is, it's like the same type of pathway. So nitric oxide is very important. And the problem, of course, is when you get too much nitric oxide, such as what we talked about earlier with inflammation, you get activation of INOS activity, and now you have high levels of nitric oxide, formation of peroxynitrite, and just lots of damage. And actually, the way that the nitric oxide synthase enzymes work is they take an amino acid called arginine, and they convert it to citrulline and nitric oxide. And when you have this inflammatory aspect going on, then you use up all the substrates to produce nitric oxide. So when you need nitric oxide, you can't produce it. So when your eNOS, your endothelial nitric oxide synthase in your blood vessels need to make nitric oxide, I can't do it, let's say, because for 2 reasons. One, you have substrate depletion. There's not the arginine around because it's been used up by all the INOS that's hyperactivated everywhere in the body. And then 2 is just over the years, your nitric oxide synthase enzymes, your eNOS levels just don't function as well. You have NOS uncoupling, the amount decreases. And this happens with age. So, I mean, by the time you're, 70, 80 years old, you have like 20% as much nitric oxide as you did when you were 20 years old. I mean, it's a very significant difference, so that decline of nitric oxide with age. So we really want to do all we can to get those nitric oxide levels back up. So it's interesting, if you give arginine to administration of arginine, that's the amino acid that makes nitric oxide, you can see some increase in nitric oxide, but it's very minimal because arginine is metabolized by the liver very quickly, so it's not able to be increased in the blood very well. Interestingly, when you give citrulline, which is the byproduct of arginine metabolism, citrulline goes through this negative feedback method, and it's able to increase the concentration of arginine in the systemic circulation. So now when you want to make nitric oxide from your eNOS activity, you actually have substrate there and you can make it. So citrulline has been shown to be more effective at increasing nitric oxide level than arginine supplementation. And citrulline, you can look at the literature, there's tens of thousands of publications on the therapeutic benefits of citrulline. I mean, there's a lot. And this is where it gets really interesting though. When you combine the molecular hydrogen with the nitric oxide, with the citrulline, you have potentially a synergistic or at least an additive effect, because, and you'll see this in the publication, but you had an increased blood flow, which is number one. So, and the blood flow was higher than whether you administer hydrogen alone or you administered the citrulline alone. It was higher and it lasted for a number of hours. So a lot of nitric oxide boosting supplements, I mean, you're talking about 15, 30 minutes and it goes back to baseline. This seemed to last for several hours. I mean, quite a while. And it was measured with blood flow, thermal imaging, and fractional exhaled nitric oxide. And you can really see these changes. And so now you're thinking, okay, so we have increased nitric oxide levels. We see the increase in the improvements in blood flow, which is a big thing, especially for cognition. I mean, blood flow alone is, cerebral blood flow decreases with age. Like, by the age of like 40, you're decreasing like 1% every year or 2% every year or something. So you want to make sure you have sufficient blood perfusion in your brain, or else you start having cells that get hypoxic, not enough oxygen, or you're not able to provide substrates, glucose and energy for the cells, or remove metabolic waste, or removal of, say, your tau proteins that implicated in Alzheimer's and so on. So you need to have good blood perfusion. And like I said, that decreases with age. Maybe that's partly because nitric oxide also decreases with age, right? So you can see an importance of maintaining the good levels of nitric oxide, and hydrogen is able to help do this with this combination. And then, like I said, not only just increase nitric oxide levels, but you got to regulate it. So you don't just increase it anywhere. You want to do it in the right locations at the right time, and all of this. And hydrogen being able to regulate its production metabolism is very important. So after we were able to see these results, we then just took it and did some very early human studies with it. We need to replicate them in a larger placebo-controlled blah blah blah. But this is very promising evidence, so I want to just quickly publish it and put it out there because it's very, very interesting. But we found there was improvements in your cardiorespiratory fitness, as measured by your VO2 max, your functional threshold, and then, like, another one that we did at the university that I teach at here, we did this basically a fatigue bout, 50 repetitions of maximal isokinetic leg extensions, having machines that measures, how much torque is being produced. And there was a very significant difference, like 27% increase in strength after drinking the product.
In what time frame?
I mean, this was
it right after drinking?
Probably 30 minutes or so, between 20 to 40 minutes, is when I gave it to him. So yeah, it was very interesting to look at. And so we're seeing, and then of course with the brain gauge. So the brain gauge, of course, is a very interesting somatosensory assessment tool that can helps to see if cognitive function, traumatic brain injuries, and it's very, very sensitive. They're using it in the highest levels of the military, university, a whole bunch of stuff, right?
Very impressive.
And yeah, surprisingly, or not surprisingly, because it makes sense, when you increase blood flow, blood perfusion to the brain, nitric oxide and all these things, and the benefits of hydrogen alone on the brain, there's a lot of articles on that. There was significant improvements in the indices of cognitive function as measured by the brain gauge. So that was pretty promising as well. Anyway, so there's it I would say, it's this hydrogen and citrulline combination. It doesn't have to be maybe citrulline. I mean, this is just what the research was done, but we would need to do research on, maybe another nitric oxide type molecule, or producing molecule, or, and there's other ingredients in the product, like it has like erythritol, which has antioxidant effects. It has quite a number of different therapeutic effects, and it's smaller than mannitol, so it has no like gastrointestinal issues. Like, I mean, you'd have to drink like, I don't know, like 50 grams or something for it to be a problem. This is sure a lot lower, obviously, like, I don't know, 5-10 grams. But then you wonder, maybe some of these other ingredients in here are also important in potentiating this synergistic effect, right? So I guess I'm just saying, I don't know that it's as simple as just combining hydrogen with citrulline or something. It may be, but maybe there's a specific proprietary ratio or something that so it's just something that we.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the hydro shot is in the test, informal test, and at least one formal test that have been done, the reaction of users has been remarkable. I mean, and this is a product that begs to be explored.
And it tastes good.
and it happens to taste good, but
Yeah.
we can't even tell you the stories of even the famous people and the people who've tried it and what they did. I mean, it's almost a funny story, because I don't think anyone expected that this little RTD that does so much. Okay. So, I mean, I encourage people when I think we're going to put it up on Water and Wellness and make a little special events and for people to try it or buy a case of it and just see and explore it. I think you're going to find it quite remarkable.
So just for clarification, the hydro shot is around 2 ppm. The tablets produce around 8 to 10 ppm, depending on the volume of water.
Yes.
Both have been found to be clinically beneficial. A lot of people use them in combination. There's a lot of athletes that just love the hydro shot. And an area that is near and dear to my heart is in the cognitive benefits, because in that research, Tyler, it was the Journal of Science and Medicine, correct?
Yes.
And they found that there was an increase in focus, speed, and plasticity in the brain.
Yeah.
So there's so many people now that have cognitive decline much earlier than they should, because of the use of certain cholesterol lowering medication and certain acid reflux medications, and even hypothyroidism, which is epidemic, which is impacting the blood flow to the brain. Back to your point, Tyler. So many people need to take this proactive approach as you're getting older, and taking something like hydrogen that can impact the immune system and cardiometabolic health and all of these areas. It's so easy with just one tablet, and that's why I love it.
Yeah.
Robert.
Yeah, it makes it very simple, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, just a tablet a day keeps well, maybe that's another. But it's consistent, right? And it's just, or like with ready to drink, you just open it and it's there. And for some people, like the tablets, 8, 10, milligrams per liter. I used to say milligrams per liter because it's much better than ppm, parts per million. That's very confusing. Is this volume per volume or mass per mass or mole per mole? Anyway, if we say milligrams per liter, we're going to be
okay.
True.
Those are our marching orders, milligrams per liter.
So, but then, like, it's interesting because the tablet produces super saturated levels, and that's why it's all cloudy like this. Like, it's like millions of these nano bubbles and everything that's in there, and so that's why you have to drink it very quickly. And you don't have to drink the hydro shot as quickly because it's fully dissolved. Again, it's 2 milligrams per liter, which is still very high, and it's higher than most products you'll ever find on the market. But it's fully dissolved, and so you don't have to be in as big of a rush. But it's still like evaporating out, and so you still would want to drink it, within a few minutes if you can. And it's 250 milliliters, 8.4 ounces for those who haven't fully converted to the metric system yet.
Good comments.
So Tyler, I'd like to ask you, what are 3 things that you do on a daily basis that most impact your health, actions that you take to ensure that you age well?
Yeah, okay. I have to think about it.
Besides hydrogen.
Yeah.
Use.
Well,
the 30-something entertain the words aging at all?
yes.
Well, what is you don't have to give us your exact age, but what
thinking that
what's the age range?
I'm in my mid-30s, so that's
30-something, yes.
30-something. I'm not
And
quite.
an athlete.
That's an even number, divisible by 2. Okay, so so of course I like to exercise. So and then my 2 focuses, I like cardiovascular, so aerobic exercise, high intensity aerobic exercise. Actually, I like to compete in races, so I run, right? So I And right now I'm doing, like 3 to 5 miles a day. I was doing like 15 or 20 miles a day, but that's not healthy. But I was really trying to like, just kind of, do that for a little bit. So I run, and so I can compete in races and things. That's a lot of fun for me. And then I also do weightlifting because, having muscle mass and the bone density and everything, that's something I really enjoy. And I feel like you have to have both of that strength aspect for, because your muscles are not just, muscles, like they're myokine. They produce myokines, signaling from the muscles. That's very important for overall health and longevity. So it's a very important area. And then of course I try to stimulate my mind as much as I can through novel, intellectual, cognitively stimulating reading, philosophy, science, or satire.
What's a good book that you've read over the past year?
I always struggle with this because I feel like if I say it, it's like an endorsement of everything said in it. But I did just read, I just read this book, Breathe, by James Nestor. Just the importance of nasal breathing and things. Some very interesting. I mean, he's not a physiologist, so there were some things in there I'm like, well, I could probably change that. But overall, I mean, it was very, very interesting. I have been focus more on like the nasal breathing when I go running. So I can normally do like my first, mile, 2 miles, I'll just only breathe through my nose, of course, at a slower pace, but I'm trying to increase my CO2, just be able to hold that better, right? Yeah. So it's pretty easy for me now to just, I can hold my breath for 3 minutes pretty easy with just taking holding my breath. So I think that's good. I think it has some benefits for activating some of the vagus nerve, to more parasympathetic, and then just, doing like this resonant frequency breathing for heart rate variability. I'm just trying to increase that. So anyway, that's the most recent book that I had read. It was interesting. I enjoyed it.
Very cool. Very good report.
So Robert, do you have any other questions?
I'm not sure that we have to be mindful of our time. I think we've gone over a little bit, but
thank you so much, Tyler.
I really enjoyed this. This is the most I've enjoyed being with Tyler since I met him years ago. So I think we should do more of these things and explore even outside of the hydrogen realm.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I mean, there's always something new with hydrogen, but there's so much more out there. So it's nice to talk about other things that,
Tyler, should I take hydrogen before boarding an airplane? Will it help guard against some of the radiation?
I thought you were gonna say, would it help save on fuel? Because everyone's gonna be like a fighter or something. Yeah, that because hydrogen, one of the strong benefits that appears preclinically and clinically even is that it protects against some radiation toxicity. And so, yeah, if you're flying really high, it might help. So yeah, I think probably doing that before a flight could be a good idea. It would be great to do a clinical study to look before and after. I think that's something that could be done in the future. But for now, the preclinical work is there, the hypothesis is there. So I
would say it also offers some respiratory protective mechanisms.
Well, just because of the how it's able to help with inflammation, right? And
yes.
Right. So yeah, I mean, and whether you're inhaling it, if you just drink water, if you think about it, it's still going to go,
Right.
right. It's going to go right to the heart and then pump directly to the lungs. So you're still getting, hydrogen to your lungs that way as well.
Yeah. Perfect. Modulating the immune response.
All right. Well, it was such a pleasure as always, Robert. So I enjoyed your commentary, and
Thank you.
I'm glad you're redeeming yourself from your H- shenanigans back in the day.
I had to come clean, didn't I?
Oh, that's wonderful. And Angela, thank you as well. It's a pleasure.
Keep up the good work with the research, and I look forward to seeing more in regards to neurodegenerative conditions in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
See you guys.
Talk again.
Loved it.
Bye, guys.